Hi everyone, Hugo here, one of the co-hosts of the show. What you're about to watch is a highlight from one of our most recent episodes. To get access to the full version, receive 2 exclusive episodes a month, get every episode 1 week early, and help us stay as independent as possible, support us on Patreon through the link below. Thank you. Now enjoy the show. So, Ben, is the United States going to attack Venezuela? And if they are, what's the American military strategy going to be?
Well, the sad answer is that the U.S. is already attacking Venezuela. The question is if they'll escalate further. And unfortunately, I do think they will escalate further. The question, of course, on everyone's mind is what would that escalation look like? Now, I personally don't think that they'll put troops on the ground in the sense of like a conventional invasion like the Iraq War. But I mean, there are reports that Trump is thinking of sending special operations forces to try to assassinate President Nicolas Maduro. That's a very real possibility. The U.S. already backed a failed invasion of Venezuela. This is often forgotten. People kind of jokingly called it Bay of Piglets. And that was in 2020. So back in 2019, Trump, in his first term, started a coup attempt in Venezuela. There have been many coup attempts in Venezuela, including in 2002, there was a briefly successful coup against Hugo Chavez. And then there were coup attempts in 2014, a violent coup attempt backed by the U.S., another violent coup attempt in 2017. And then in 2019, there was this coup attempt with Juan Guaido, where they had this little-known right-wing opposition politician named Juan Guaido, who was backed by the U.S. He went out in the street and declared himself so-called interim president, despite the fact that he never participated in a presidential election. The U.S. appointed him the so-called interim president. The U.S. pressured a few dozen countries to also recognize him. At the peak, there were around 30 to 40 countries recognizing him. But again, there are 193 UN member states, so the vast majority of countries never recognized him. They always continued recognizing the constitutional president, Maduro. So that coup attempt failed. But when the coup attempt was already dying, in 2020, there was an attempted invasion of Venezuela that was called Operation Gideon. And this was led by 2 former U.S. Army Special Operations Forces, Green Berets. And the operation was overseen by another Green Beret named Jordan Goudreau, who was working with the Trump administration. He later admitted this in lawsuits because, if you work for the U.S. empire and you fail, then they abandon you. This is what they always do. They stab you in the back. So this guy, Jordan Goudreau, was working with the CIA. He admitted that. He was working with the Trump administration, and then it failed, and they just abandoned him with plausible deniability, saying they didn't know who this guy was. So he sued them, being like, you owe me millions of dollars. So what this guy was doing is he was training mercenaries in northern Colombia, and then they went in a boat into Venezuela, and some fishermen, socialist fishermen from a union who supported the government, they were Chavistas, they saw these guys being led by 2 obvious, I guess maybe they had masks on, but they probably, it was very strange. They were like, who are these guys invading? And then they told the security forces, and then they arrested them. And there's this famous photo of these 2 random white guys, these Green Berets, who were being held by these Venezuelan officers. So there was an attempted invasion, but of course now we're talking about something much more extreme, where there are reports that there are around 10,000 U.S. troops now in the region, about half of them in Puerto Rico, which shows how the U.S. has colonized Puerto Rico and has used this as this kind of colonial outpost to attack other countries in the region. And the U.S. has at least 6 naval vessels, warships surrounding Venezuela. The U.S. has already killed at least 60 people, and these are innocent people. There has been no evidence whatsoever that they're so-called drug traffickers. And there have been reports, even in Politico, a mainstream outlet, in which the former Department of Defense, now much more accurately called the Department of War, admitted they actually have no evidence proving these people are trafficking drugs, in scare quotes. And there are reports that these boats don't even have enough gasoline to make it to the U.S., as if they were, it's absurd. And then on these boats, there are 10 people that are killed. Why would 10 people be on a drug boat? They want to minimize the number of people to maximize the amount of drugs. It's so stupid. It's all a completely fake narrative, but it's part of this new WMD's myth, right? The new weapons of mass destruction myth, which is trying to create this narrative that supposedly Nicolas Maduro is not a real president. Instead, the U.S. narrative is that he's the leader of a drug cartel, in scare quotes, called the Carta de los Soles, the Suns Cartel, which does not exist, by the way. Numerous independent experts on the drug trade have investigated, and they have said that there's no evidence. The U.S. government literally invented this. And if you look at the so-called evidence presented by the U.S. government, which is all fabricated, you look at the list they have of the supposed leaders. What a coincidence. All of the leaders of this fake drug cartel just so happen to be the leaders of the Venezuelan government and the Venezuelan military.
Yeah.
So they're using the same excuse that was actually used in 1989 when the U.S. invaded Panama and they overthrew the Panamanian government, killed many civilians. I mean, I've been to Panama many times because a lot of flights in Latin America go through Panama. And there are still poor parts of Panama City where there was not that much rebuilding. These are still very poor parts of the city that have just been abandoned by the neoliberal government. So the U.S. devastated Panama, and then they kidnapped the leader of Panama, Manuel Noriega, who ironically had been a longtime CIA asset. So the U.S. knew that he was a drug trader because he was trafficking drugs for the CIA for a long time
Cheney,
until
rest
he
in
became
peace,
the leader of Panama. Yeah, I mean, like Saddam Hussein was also working with the CIA in the original Ba'ath coup. So there are so many examples of this throughout history. But anyway, the point is that's the kind of blueprint, is that the U.S. wants to launch some kind of attack in Venezuela, kidnap President Maduro, likely kidnap Noriega, and then imprison him in the U.S., have a kangaroo court, a fake trial on these bogus charges. It's completely absurd. And there have been reports, including in the New York Times, saying that there are kind of three options being considered. One of them I already talked about, which is that it would be an attack by special operations forces to try to kidnap and or assassinate President Maduro. That's one option. The other option being considered is bombing Caracas with U.S. planes or sending missiles from U.S. ships. Or another option is they're going to try to just continue to do like a naval blockade in Venezuela, massively increase the pressure, try to cause a coup inside Venezuela, which I don't think will work, but try to cause a coup, try to make Maduro so afraid that they force him to flee is what they claim will happen, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Well,
It's so interesting that they decide to go this route of the drug trafficking or like the war on drug stuff, which is so early 2000s dated, if that makes sense. Like the craze around drugs was like a late 80s, 90s, and then early 2000s, and then it just kind of got swept away into the war on terrorism stuff. But they can't do the terrorism charge on Venezuela. I don't know, it's because I guess they're not Muslim. I think that's the thinking, that they couldn't choose that excuse.
Pretty much.
So they decided to go drug trafficking. Thing is, the vast majority of Americans, I don't think give a shit. I don't think they care. And it kind of, at least because I'm not American, but my perusing of American media, you don't see, like when you, for example, if you were to try to see how much coverage there is of quote-unquote terrorist attacks or these developments in quote-unquote terrorist countries or terrorist movements from what they claim Hezbollah or what's going on in Yemen or Iran supporting certain things, whatever else, right? There's so much of it. There's probably an article every day or every other day about something, especially when Israel is in the crosshairs. But when you look at the drug trafficking thing, it's always like a beeline to, like the Trump administration wants to, or the U.S. government wants to start beef with them, right? New beef, I guess. Something that is actually kind of refreshing, which is very strange for American media. You also see that they mention every once in a while that, there was a coup attempt, an American coup attempt of the Venezuelan government before. But this time is different. No. This time the American government claimed that there's drug trafficking happening.
It's refreshing that we also see like mainstream reporting that unironically says Trump has been lobbied to do a coup in Venezuela ever since his first term, but he quote unquote never liked the pitch. And what they're trying to say with this is, Maduro, evil dictator. And he's like, is that going to get me votes? That doesn't sound that good. And finally, they created narco-terrorist dictator. And he's like, drugs. That feels good. That feels good. I think they're gonna, the chuds will be able to eat this up. It's like toddlers playing with nuclear missiles. And I know this is an absurd cliche, but when you have, again, mainstream American journalists being like, the main reason he said yes, and we have sources in the intelligence community of the United States, the main reason he said yes because he was like, I love this hashtag. Hashtag narco-terrorist. Narco. I like the narco spin. Let's do it. It's so absurd. Please, Ben, apologies.
Yeah, I agree with everything you guys said except one little thing that Hakeem said, which is that you said they can no longer do the war on terror. Well, actually, what they're doing is they're combining the bogus war on drugs with the bogus war on terror together, right? Because Trump actually, in an executive order, he recognized these drug cartels as so-called terrorist organizations. So they literally are bringing back these two completely bogus failed wars. And of course, if you know anything about the war on drugs, you know that the U.S. has always been allied with the worst drug dealers in Latin America, and the people who were working with the U.S. to wage the so-called war on drugs were themselves complicit in drug trafficking.
Thank you for watching. To gain access to the full episode, receive 2 exclusive episodes a month, get every episode 1 week early, and help us stay as independent as possible, support us on Patreon through the link below.